Hey, Twist Misters, welcome back to my channel. I'm going to be showing you a really quick basic tutorial of how to soft solder. Check the details below for a list of all the materials and tools I'll be using for this tutorial. First things and foremost, let's talk about how to prep for soft soldering. I use a tip turner before starting just to remove any impurities from my tip, but also to aid in the hearing of you soldering into your tool. Now, you also have to utilize flux. That's very important. And then, of course, you also have to make sure that whatever you are going to soft solder is clean as well. I have a previous tutorial I made on how to make a bezel into a gemstone, so don't forget to check that out. When you're doing your first application, first layer of soft solder, you have to apply your flux, and you want to go as thinly as possible. Just a little bit of soft solder honestly goes a very long way. You also want to make sure that it's clean, so the more solder you have on your tip, the more gunky it will get, and you're going to have a hard time smoothing everything out and making sure that everything is covered. It is a very reflective surface, so you have to go slow, pay attention, use different lighting to make sure that you've covered all the gaps. And if you've noticed that there are parts that you did not cover well, you need to go over it. Now, gemstones can be very tricky because they are natural semi-precious stones that are composed by minerals. Some stones are very temperamental with heat, so if you apply heat for too long, they can crack and break. So minimizing exposure to heat is going to be your goal. Depending on the surfaces that you're working with, like this one is a faceted but only one-sided flat, so it's easier to hold, and every now and then, as you saw like 2 seconds ago, it goes and flies right out. So make sure you're working in an area where if your gemstone falls, it's not going to get lost or damaged. If you have been working on one side for too long, put it down, let it cool off, and then go back and work on it. The key here is to apply solder in steps and then smooth out as you go. If for whatever reason you're applying solder and it's not attaching, it's either your surface area is either dirty or you don't have enough flux. Everybody works differently, so for some people, some fluxes may be better than others, so try out a few. I understand that it costs money, but it will help you out in the long run. Some of them are paste, some of them are liquid. I like the liquid, and I like to apply it with a little thin paintbrush. And that paintbrush is solely dedicated for applying flux. I don't want to contaminate it with anything else. Now, this is a different stone, so it's a lot easier to cover, but because it's smaller, I have to work faster. This one's a moonstone, and as you can see, I've already pretty much almost finished it. So as you're working with different stones, you'll be challenged with different angles, the way the bezel is formed. You want to make sure you cover all the edges. Once you've done this, you can go back and apply more solder to make the bezel a lot thicker. Just keep doing that until you cover everything, and then make sure you obviously get the front and the back, and that you don't miss any spots. Soft soldering can be really toxic. Now, you have to have proper ventilation. Please wear a mask, wear some eye gear, and because it's such high temperatures, you want to use either pliers, a third hand, which is a device that allows you to hold an object and give you free range of your two hands so that you can work freely with whatever craft you're working on. Very well known in silversmithing medium. You can also use your hands to hold your object, but I will warn you, it can get really hot and you can get burned. People that are familiar or experts in this medium sometimes choose to hold it if they know how to handle it well, but in the long term, your hands will suffer. You may burn your fingertips, It's just not a good look on the long run. So just be careful with what you're working on, have handy pliers, and it will make your life so easy. With any soft soldering jewelry, you are going to come across on how to make bezels, how to create your design. So just be creative, try to do different things, try to implement different objects into your soft soldering. You literally can use whatever you see. Like you can use branches, you can use gemstones. I've seen people use, and I personally have used deer tips. So obviously you have to prep all surfaces, make sure that it has a conductive area, so if you put your foil on it, you're good to go. Now I am using regular solid copper wire here to create kind of like a connective area between these two. Because soft soldering can be adhered to copper, you can obviously cover the copper wire, or you can leave it as is to give it that two-tone color. So that's something that you can think about in your future projects. It makes it beautiful depending on how you are designing it or making it, or you can just make it all solid silver and then it would be just one fluid design. Soldering wire is it's just the same as soldering a bezel, but because it's more thin, it's can be harder depending on how hot your tip is. So every time you're soft soldering, just make sure that your temperature is at the adequate amount for what your solder requires. Too hot can burn your tip, so you're going to go through tips a lot. And then too low is going to create issues where the solder is not melting, it's creating lumps. So you need to find just your happy medium. Every soldering tool is different. Every soldering wire is also different. So just test out a few techniques from low to high and then find just your happy medium. The next best thing that you can do is to flux solder, and that's just continue on until your entire surface area is completely covered with solder. Make sure it's smooth because it's just going to be easier in the end run, because then you don't have to file anything away. Yes, you can definitely end up with sharp pointy places, so you need to file those down, otherwise you can get like nicked a little bit. Not necessarily like make a huge cut, but it's just going to be too pointy, and because it's a jewelry piece, you just want everything to be nice and done. Another big pointer with working with wire is because the surface area is so small and both mediums, copper and silver, are very reflective, you can miss areas that do not get solder. So just make sure you kind of like twist it around so that the light hits angles at different ways, and then go back and just cover over that area. I haven't pointed it out, but just make sure you're working over a clean flat surface. It's just going to make life easier. If you don't have like expensive gadgets to help you keep your objects together like I'm doing here, it's just going to help you make sure that those pieces remained still and also very sturdy, so that when you're making the connections, it's not going to be lopsided. Now, pre-designing before you start doing anything is very important. Once you make those joint connections, you technically can make them go undone by reapplying heat to it and melting it, and then quickly pull away from the joint, but it's hard and it can damage your piece. So the best part is to make sure that whatever you are going to join together, that's exactly how you want it, because once you do it, changes can only be done very minimally. I recommend using one small dab at each joint before doing anything else. What you're trying to accomplish here is just to make a temporary fix so that your piece is not moving too much. You can do everything else later, but this is very crucial. This is going to make sure that your piece is not wobbling around where you're trying to finish it. So flux, dab, flux, dab. And once you're done, then you can go freely and go and start and covering all your places. Now, with very small joints, you're going to come across issues that because it's too hot, you may undo a joint. So just be very careful in not putting too much heat in one place for too long, because it will undo it. After you successfully attach your joints, you want to go over the entire piece and make sure that all those chunky joints you made go smoothly around your design. It's just going to make everything flow and look very nice. But it's just going to also make those joints stronger. Just be careful not to go over it too long and too hot, because you can undo all the work that you did. At this phase, you can add different textures to your piece to make it look cool or just different. But it's up to you. You can leave it smooth. And then at this point, don't forget to attach your bail. Again, don't forget to dab, solder, make a very strong joint for this, because this is where the piece is going to be hanging from. Now, here I've already attached the bail, and I also added some texture to my wire piece because I wanted to try something different. If you're interested in seeing how I've made texture on my wire with soft solder, please drop a comment and I'll see about making a tutorial about that. But yeah, it's very important that all your copper is covered, all your joints are strong, and if you're nice and happy, then you're all done. Now, you also have to think about filing and cleaning. I use a hand file to just go over the areas that I think may be a little too sharp, not smooth, or that just want to be evenly. I use a hand file for that. I also use a wire brush to bring back shine. So I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. This is all I have for you today. Drop in the comments if you have any questions or if you want to see more. Thanks for stopping by.